Okay, it looks like my video got cut off, so we'll go ahead and return to our PowerPoint. Technology. Okay, so we were talking about Nineveh was the chief town. Maybe you've heard of the story of Jonah um, and the whale or fish, and Nineveh was the town he was sent to. Asher is their chief god in Assyria. Let me just double check that you are not seeing me too big yet. Good. And so Asher is their chief god. So they say Asher, but that's where Assyrian comes from. Okay. Siege machinery, terroristic tactics, enslavement, execution, pillaging, and rape. Not a fun group. Empire stretched from Upper Tigris to Central Egypt. The Assyrian Empire conquered people under the Chaldees, and then Nineveh was destroyed. Now, Assurbanipal was built. He was a king of Assyria, and he built the largest library of ancient times, 20,000 volumes of clay tablets. That would be heavy book of tablets, clay. Here's the Assyrian Empire. You can see the orange is Assyrian, and then the Persian one was much, much bigger. It talks about the King of Kings. The King of Kings would have referred to as Cyrus the Great, who is, of course, my favorite historical character. Phoenicians lived along the coastal strip, present-day Lebanon, and then they were such good sailors that they spread and migrated all around the rim of the Mediterranean, and then they did set up a city in Carthage, which we'll talk more about. Very cool historical character, Hannibal, who took an army with elephants over the Alps to pretty much kick Rome's ass. That's later, though. So Carthage and the Phoenicians are pretty cool. They came up with the phonetic alphabet, where before it was pictographs. You know, we saw that with hieroglyphics and with cuneiform. Chinese writing had both pictographs and sounding out as well. But they had 22 letters or marks, and so B would say ba, C would say ka, and that is what phonetics is. Made literacy accessible to more people. And then the Greeks adopted it and put 4 vowels, and that's why we have 26 letters in our alphabet. Here's a picture of Phoenician female, a tambourine player. The Persians, one of my favorite ancient civilizations. Central point of the Silk Road, it was Persepolis. So they had, Silk Road and trading. So it was like in the middle. Persepolis was the capital. That's where the palace was. Cyrus the Great built this empire. I love Cyrus the Great. He's my favorite. The day he took power, he freed all the slaves of his entire kingdom. And you saw all that green. It's so crazy when we talk about U.S. slavery or England, slavery in England or Spain, and they're like, oh, we need to do it gradually so it doesn't bust our economy. This dude came into power, freed them all. Also, he really, of course, I'm sure he loved his Persian background and culture, but he would travel to all of his different kingdoms, and Israel happened to be one of them. And he would say, I want you to show me your best books, your best poetry, your best painting, dances, food, and he would exchange ideas. So there was this respect of other cultures. And if I teach you anything, I really want to teach you respect of meeting someone who's new and different, and finding the good things in their culture that we can borrow from, okay? And exchange, right, of learning. All right. His son was Cambyses. He became king after him, but Cyrus ruled for a long time. What's crazy about Cyrus the Great is he's in the Bible, and like Hebrews never praised many outsiders because they often were persecuted, but they really praised Cyrus the Great because he let them go back to Israel. He let them rebuild their temple. He did many good things for many different kingdoms. Remember, as long as you pay, taxes, obey the laws, and provide soldiers, it says conscript soldiers at the end of this PowerPoint, you could have religious freedom. You could rule yourselves. He would put a satrap in place, Persian supervisor, and they would rule the province. But as long as you didn't cause trouble, you had freedom, and it was amazing and a new idea. Main cities were Susa, Persepolis, Ecbatana. Maybe you've heard of Susa before, maybe not. It is in biblical story also a place that is mentioned in Esther. So it was Cyrus the Great, Cambyses, and then Darius. And then Darius's son was Xerxes. And Xerxes was married to Esther, and that's what the book of Esther is about as well. Okay, then we have Zoroastrianism, which is amazing because it's not just these angry gods, it's these gods that reward you for telling the truth and doing what's right. So this is a whole new thought about religion, and it's called ethical religion, and it's monotheistic, based on the teachings of Zoroaster. The religious text or religious book was the Avestas, monotheistic, conflict between good and evil, Ahura Mazda versus Aharon, which would be God and the devil, ultimate triumph of good, human free will, judgment day, and hell, had all these different things. You have to understand, in Hammurabi's day, the different gods and goddesses were just being appeased. They were just angry all the time. If you remember reading the Code of Hammurabi, at the end there's like, you'll be cursed, this will happen to you, that'll happen to you, bad, bad, bad if you don't listen. It's very much based on judgment. And this is different. Darius I extended the empire in great size. He tried and failed to conquer Greece, as did his son Xerxes. Hebrews. Most of what we know from the Hebrews comes from the Tanakh, or the Old Testament Bible, stories of Abraham leading people from the wilderness into the land of Canaan. Coincides with archaeological evidence of Semitic migration. So I want you to look up, Semitic, or just realize that Semitic isn't just Jewish. It's actually is referring to languages of Arabic, Jewish, and Aramaic, and some other languages, those people that speak them. Migration to the Nile Valley, Exodus under Moses, return to Canaan, conflicts with Canaanites and Philistines. Philistines today would be translated Palestinians. They're the same line of people, just like we say Israelites before, and now we just say Israel. King Saul was the first king, and then it was set up under him, his successor, King David. And King David conquered Jerusalem, Hebrews' capital city. I'm just going to check and make sure that we're doing great. All right. The recording had stopped before, so we really don't want that to happen. Okay, King Solomon was David's son, and King Solomon built a magnificent temple, and it's often known as one of the top 10 wonders of the ancient world built by man. And we have tons of records of what it looked like. Different historians wrote about it, and it was absolutely magnificent. It says, magnificent, expensive temple of Jerusalem. Israel was extremely wealthy under King Solomon. There was a revolt under King Solomon that split the kingdoms into the north and the south, Israel and Judea, because King Solomon's son was too harsh. Something else you need to realize is, there was, and we'll talk about this later, but King Solomon had 1,000 wives, 300 concubines, and 700 wives. And that was actually supposed to be forbidden. Kings weren't supposed to gather wives. It would turn their heart away from God. And they weren't supposed to believe in horses and put their faith in horses. Interesting stuff. Okay, Judea continued under the Assyrians, but they were captives. Okay, Babylonians defeat, Babylonian captivity. The temple was demolished. Persians took over. They were very tolerant of the Jews. Cyrus the Great let them go back and rebuild the temple. Alexander the Great conquered the area in 330 BC. We have where the Philistines live, Judea, Samaria, Phoenicians. All right, I'll kind of put in there together. Yahweh was the name for God, or Jehovah, chief deity of the Hebrews, became the only God of the Jews, monotheism. They were bound by a covenant. If you read about covenants, it's really interesting. Like if you made a covenant with a person in Israel, you would cut animals in half and you would walk between them and you would say, we're making a covenant, and if you don't keep your end, and if I don't keep mine, may we be like the animals that are cut in half. And then they would cook the animals and have a meal together. Interesting stuff. Contracts aren't quite that tricky today. It required an adherence to the Ten Commandments, which is interesting because I believe Hammurabi had 243, 248, 240 something. And then there's only 10 commandments, and they're very different. And, putting them side by side, 5 of the commandments have to do, 4 or 5 of the commandments have to do with the relationship with God. And 240 commandments had nothing to do with the relationship with God in the Code of Hammurabi. So really kind of distinctive polarity. Judaism and Zoroastrianism are earliest attempts to link ethics and worship. Yahweh was an enforcer of correct ethical action, and evil would be punished. Here we have a seal. They would have like this round thing that kind of looked like one of those when you're painting, the rolls. But this would have be a hard seal, and you would impress it on clay, and then it would come up with a clay seal like what you're looking at. The inscription, there's Darius, chariot, Ahura Mazda, and a lion underneath. And it reads, to the left it says, I am King Darius in several languages. Okay. Here's a lion hunt. This is Azur, I say his name, I have to say it quick. Azurbanipal at a lion hunt, and it shows the chariot, the spearman, the king, and killing this lion in the lion hunt. Economic change. Jews were a minor player in economic affairs. Division into 2 kingdoms really weakened them. They were very, very wealthy under King Solomon. Frequent wars. And they made the transition from nomadic herders to town life. Abraham and Saul. Saul was their first king. Social tension between rich and poor appeared. This is really interesting. So I had it brought to my attention, and was reading about it, that it said the prophets from this time period, 700s to 400s BCE, repeatedly called for social justice, especially for the poor. There are over 420 verses about stop putting down the poor, stop being mean to the poor, help the poor. The poor will always be with you, but don't let the rich exploit the poor. Why are people poor? Because the rich exploit them, swindle them. I mean, all these verses about poor and not being that rich person that takes advantage of them. Pretty wild stuff. Social customs. Yahweh was a male deity. Women were looked at more like property. Marriage divorce reflected patriarchy. There was male polygamy. That means men could have many wives, even though it stated early on in the Old Testament that kings were not supposed to marry more than one. And of course, we found out that, David had several hundreds, and Solomon had 1,000, and saying 300 were concubines and 700 were wives. Let's see. Wife married into husband's family, moved into his house, retained separate property rights. Divorce easy for husband, very unusual for the wife. Adultery defined by marital status of the woman. So a man could have sex with whoever he wanted, a woman could not. A man would only get in trouble if the woman was married. Children, the key reason for marriage. Boys shared inheritance, girls did not. Education carried out within the family. Changing theology. So changing theology, concept of Yahweh changed over time. The long spiritual crisis during the Babylonian captivity. New interpretation of the covenant or the Talmud. It granted men free will, thus allowing principle of evil to appear in the last judgment. I want to go back up. Let's see. Not only was Yahweh the only God, he was the universal God of all. He was just, merciful, omnipotent, and omniscient. So this is a belief. Omnipotent is all-powerful, and omniscient means he knows everything. He's all-knowing. Yahweh became personal. So this is how it's shifting. He could be prayed to directly. Actions were not impulsive or unpredictable. Relationship between God and man is meant to be one of mutual love. So here we have this love infusion coming. Not just ethics, but love too. Expecting the Messiah, a belief in a king from the line of David was coming. Disbelief in Jesus, okay, because he spoke of a kingdom not of this earth, a spiritual kingdom. He wasn't here to take over from the Romans. Changing theology, the zealots expecting a powerful Messiah to liberate the government of Israel were unwilling to bend before any non-believer. Tension between Jewish nation and Roman overlords. Zealots rebelled. Their defeat led to the second diaspora, which, a diaspora is the dispersion of people all over for many reasons. Relationships between the deity and his creations, mutually dependent, ethical, and just, merciful on the Lord's side, submissive but not slavish on man's side, basis for the evolution of Christianity. This is pretty cool. There's a picture of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Got to see an exhibition of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it was amazing. They were everywhere, and it was pretty neat because it would have like Isaiah over here, different time frames, and it was saying the same thing. It was pretty cool. And these historic documents were found in the cave above the Dead Sea in 1947. The Dead Sea is in Israel. The scrolls have been largely deciphered in recent years and have proven a rich source of knowledge of Jewish society and customs around the 1st century CE. Really awesome. Key empires of the first millennium BCE included Assyrians with their efficient but brutal military, Phoenicians known for their invention of the alphabet, Persian Empire who brought peace and progress to much of the Near East, and the rise of ethical monotheism, both in Zoroastrianism and Judaism. All right, so I think we got through the chapter after much technical difficulty. All right, I wanted to see if I wanted to add anything from the PowerPoint. Let's see. Hebrews, talked about all that. Chariots. Of course, Cyrus the Great is amazing. All right. Xerxes and Esther. I think I did talk about that. There were 12 tribes of Israel. And 2 tribes stayed in Judah, and then the 10 tribes were the North Israel that became Samaria later. We talked about what Semitic means. It's actually more related to a language. Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic are Semitic languages. I know now today anti-Semitic really refers to people who are racist against Jews, but that word Semitic is broader, just so that you know. The lion hunt, Yahweh, hanging guards of Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar. I don't think I talked about that. So in the Babylonian captivity, Nebuchadnezzar is also mentioned in the Bible. And he also built one of the 7 wonders of the world, which is incredible. And so Nebuchadnezzar, the story goes that he knew Daniel and he knew Daniel and he met Nebuchadnezzar. That's how the story goes. Nebuchadnezzar built one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, this huge garden that had like a bucket system that would scoop up water from the Tigris or Euphrates. I can't remember which one it was. And it would water these gardens because his wife and queen was very homesick, and her where she was from was a place that was lush and beautiful and tropical. So he built this out of love because she missed it. And so the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are pretty cool because it had like a mechanical system of watering. Okay. I think we talked a little bit about the coming Messiah and a king on earth. All right. So I think that's it. Okay. And that finishes chapter 7. Thank you very much. Hello, and welcome to World Civilizations 1. We are studying World Civ up until the 1500s. Today we are on Chapter 7, and it is called New Civilizations and Empires in Western and Central Asia. It starts off with a picture of some Assyrian art. And we'll talk about that for a minute. But one thing that we want to talk about the Assyrians is their siege warfare. And I'm Jennifer, your history professor. And I wanted to teach you something. I don't know if you have the dictionary app on your phone, but it really helps you get deeper into history if you use it. So I just want to really encourage you to get it. Let me see if I can show it to you. So it's the D right here. Whoa. It's kind of hard to do right there. And it is a dictionary app that's free. I use it all the time. And especially when I was in grad school, I looked up words all the time and really love a good thesaurus. and it just really helps me understand words deeper. So I wanted to look up the word siege, because we did find out that the Assyrians were very good at siege warfare. So what does siege mean? I mean, it means war, the basic stuff, but when you look it up, I really feel like you get a deeper picture and meaning. Siege means the actual process of surrounding and attacking a fortified place. Okay, so they were good at that, taking down a walled city. That's a little deeper than just warfare, good at warfare. In such a way as to isolate it from help and supplies, for the purpose of lessening the resistance of the defenders and thereby making capture possible. Okay, so they were great at cracking down the walls of a city and getting in, and everyone knew it. So they were a terrifying force, probably the most, and they were also a very hated group, because they had such stories about them being vicious and cruel and that sort of thing. And they were supposed to be one of the best fighting forces until Alexander the Great's army. So that's quite that's quite a reputation. Now, I'm a fan of the Mongols. I think they're the biggest badasses out there. We are going to study about the Mongols, and it's fantastic and fascinating. So hold on to your hats. But right now we're talking about the Assyrians, and they were definitely good at what they did. Okay, now there's several other definitions. Okay, and then we look at thesaurus, see if there's any good words. Vex, that's always a good word. So they were good at siege, vexing others. Okay. All right, not great in the thesaurus factor, but I do love a good thesaurus. I mean, that's just something I'm super nerdy about and not apologetic. I don't know if you've heard the recent definition for nerd. Nerd is just someone who is passionate about something, and quite frankly, sign me up. Okay, that was all free, so let's go ahead and get busy on our, I'm going to put myself in the corner, and I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint. We're going to get started on Chapter 7. Super interesting stuff. Here we have the Assyrian art, where they are participating in siege warfare, climbing walls. They were just a genius for engineering and taking down those walled cities. Okay. We have our chapter chronology. Hebrews leave Mesopotamia. Maybe you've heard the story of Abraham from the city of Ur, which we've talked about, was called to go, the story goes, called to go to Canaan. Hebrew exodus from Egypt. Hebrew kingdom established. Phoenicians develop early alphabet. Assyrians empire expands. Carthage founded by Phoenicians. Carthage is an amazing historical background city that's in northern Africa. Assyrians conquer Samaria. Fall of Nineveh. End of Assyrian Empire. Establishment and expansion of the Persian Empire. Babylonian captivity of the Jews. Assyrians. Dominant Semitic people in what is now northern Iraq conquered Tigris Euphrates. Nineveh was their capital city.